I think there is something very interesting about modern life, which is who is invisible and who is not invisible.
That's a good question.
I feel like you're invisible.
Yeah. I am invisible right now. Like I'm moving and nothing is changing.
Yeah. You're like made out of like glass, polished glass, you know? It gets right through you.
Yeah,
Right?
I'm made out of M. Night Shyamalan's glass.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I can't see you either. So what's going on?
Well, you can't see me because, well, someone decided somewhere that people like me should be invisible. That is, of course, the people that forget to put their swag on in the morning.
Yeah, that's the people that are the most marginalized in society.
Yeah. Yeah, the soldier boys out there. And much like you, I am invisible because I am a little bit of I'm a little bit of a Latino. I'm a little bit of a Latiner out here.
Yeah, Latin icon AP over here.
And we are talking about invisibility because I am AP
And I am Marcy.
and this is Dove Weather. We are going to talk about the invisibility of Latin trans people
Yeah.
and their tribulations because we are talking about Las Malas.
That's right. And we have 2 copies of the book here that look completely different because AP read this book in Espanol and I read it in English.
So we are reading one of the biggest work, or as we say, obra, by Camila Sosa Villada. And in Spanish, that is Las Malas.
And in English, it's Bad Girls.
And we are currently no longer invisible because we're gonna be bad girls right now.
Yeah, we are going to be bad girls.
With a forward dash Las Malas. Bilingual.
Exactly.
And we are gonna be bilingual here.
Yeah, we're not just chaotic, we're also
Bilingual.
Las Malas.
Bilingua. I just want to give a quick info on who Camila Sosa Villada is. She is a Argentinian writer, born in the 80s. She's multidisciplinary, writes books, writes plays, acts, does everything. Looks
Queen.
good. Yeah, queen.
Except we hate the monarchy.
Yeah. Queen, parentheses, good. And she is someone who has lived quite a life. Her first book was published in the 2000s, in 2009. And a big chunk of her work really hits on some big topics that are happening right now. And Camila Sosa Villada is someone who, in English, in the parlance of the global north, would be described as trans.
Yeah, but in this book itself, and there's an author's note that explains this, she refers to herself as a travesti.
Yeah. So, travesti sounds like a lot of words that some listeners may have heard or been used as a slur to describe them. But there is a difference here.
Yeah, and I did appreciate the author's note because it kind of broke down how she wasn't familiar with the words like trans, transsexual, transgender, and that this is the word that they used that they had to take back that was like buried under all the academic language. Yeah, so like that, it's a word that's like used throughout the book, and I think it's really evocative. Like you really learn about like the culture of the travestis throughout.
And we will be using the word travesti. We will not be using the word trans, as Camila wants to be described as travesti. And she actually advocates for, the people in her community, maybe even the global community, to say you should look at a word like this, a word that was needed to be excavated and reclaimed, because in her mind and in her advocacy, it's an inheritance. This term is an inheritance that describes the history that the Argentinian travesti community has seen and struggled with and coalesced around. One that is a little more nuanced than just saying she's trans.
Yeah. And I appreciate this because it made me think about, and when AP says that we're going to be using this word and not using trans, I think I will continue to use trans to refer to myself just because that's what I'm used to. Like, as a trans person, this made me think about like the world that I came out in, the very Americanized world where if I was born in another culture, I may not use that word for myself. And language has really evolved over the years where like it used to be more common for someone to say like transsexual, like transgender has been a word that's been used more recently, and there's definitely books that like get into the history of this. Like we may be using a completely different word like 30 years from now, and we don't know.
One of the ways that I think about this is just the word queer.
Absolutely.
When I was in middle school, we used to play a football game they used that word as a pejorative. And I'm not going to repeat it right here because I feel like even repeating it feels kind of fucked up. But like now Marcy and I, we describe ourselves as queer.
Yeah.
I'm over here like, what am I queer?
I think that like, I feel like when I was younger, queer, I didn't really think of it as like a slur or anything. It was just kind of like one of those words where I was like, wait, what? And I think it was like, coming out as trans, realizing you're a lesbian, and then like kind of getting deeper into like the gender binary being a lie. Like queer just makes so much sense to describe myself and to describe a lot of the people I spend time with. And yeah, I love the way that language evolves like that. I love the way that we can reclaim words, and Camila talks about that in the author's note. So I'll just read a little bit. And so I don't use the term trans woman. I don't use surgical vocabulary cold as a scalpel because the terminology doesn't reflect our experience as travestis in these regions. From indigenous times to this nonsense of civilization, I reclaim the stonings and spittings. I reclaim the scorn. You may ask how it can be that a writer proudly identifies herself with an insult. My answer is that you're looking for the way out up there, where you think your thoughts are formed. So elevated, useful, and precise. We, after years and years of holding back the travails of Latin America with our bodies, know that you have to delve deep, go down, learn from other creatures who treasure their ignorance of themselves. We know it's better to escape through tunnels than try to leap over walls. Las Malas, the bad girls, are travestis, and even in their worst moments, they wouldn't want to go by any other name.
It just goes to show there's a real deep meaning here. And part of this exercise that we have here is just the description of seeing where we sit as two American queers and how we sit in the larger community of global queers. It's no longer the gay global agenda.
Yeah.
It's no longer the homo globo shit. It is now truly a unity hand to hand with everyone across all borders.
Yeah, and I do want to mention that I think one of the reasons why reading this book and talking about it on our podcast was so exciting is that I think like in Dove Weather, we've really like put the queerness at the forefront in our recent episodes. Ever since APA came out as pansexual, we have really said that we are a completely queer podcast. But with this book, we have an opportunity to take even more of ourselves and explore that. And specifically, AP having Latin heritage, being Latino. And so I'm really excited that we're bringing that to the fore, and that we're not just letting the white supremacist default be like what we discuss. And, I've really enjoyed like talking about like so many things recently, but like being more intentional about like talking about like covering subjects where both of our cultures are completely covered is really important to both me and AP.
Yeah, yeah. So let's talk about Las Malas.
Let's do it.
And Las Malas, it covers a character, also named Camila, who may or may not be the author, Camila. It is this book is a little bit of a biography, maybe a mythos of who Camila is, because there are fantastical aspects to this that just in the real world could not happen. And but it covers a lot of the experiences that Camila had, and that being the experience of being an Argentinian transvesti. So Camila joins this group of transvestis. In Spanish, she says manada, which means herd in English. And at the kind of like the head of that herd is La Tía Encarna. Who's La Tía Encarna?
So this is a woman who has airplane oil in her breasts. And she is definitely like the matriarch of this family of travestis.
She's lived for over 160 years.
And she is like a very caring person, but she's also a very emotional person. At the very beginning of the book, they find a baby, and she is immediately attached to this baby. This baby that's like covered in filth. And she takes the baby home and starts breastfeeding the baby on her airplane oil tits. And someone's like, why are you doing that? You don't have any milk in there. And she's like, not going to stop me. So, yeah, she's an icon.
Yeah. She goes real Twilight New Moon on that baby, imprinting.
Oh, God. I'm pretty sure that happened in Breaking Dawn.
You would know.
Well, yeah, because we watched all the Twilight movies last year.
And the Tía Encarna is kind of the nexus of this story. Camila, the book is about Camila and her life, but La Tía Encarna is such a big part of it. She is literally there at the beginning and at the end. And this one, I'm gonna tell you, we're gonna talk about everything.
We're gonna spoil.
I can promise you right now, we are not gonna cover everything that's in this book. Go read this book if you want to go read it. This is just conversation here.
Yeah.
And La Tía Encarna lives in this big pink home where she has her manada of transvestis that live and support each other. She is described as having a kitchen that always has food. Maybe not the best food, but like there's always food there. She also lives in this room that's like surrounded by vegetation of plants. She's got a big patio that's also filled with plant life. This home is big and it's spacious. It's also somewhere where everything that's needed is kind of there. Everything from the love and the strength that someone would need in this group of transvestis. And it's also a place where all of our characters live and surround.
Yeah, definitely. It's absolutely a refuge.
It's actually called like the place where desires live.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's hard to talk about anything in this book without talking about the fact that the main characters are sex workers. And we're going to get more into that soon, but I just wanted to mention that to kind of give you the context of why this refuge is needed, that these travestis who are sex workers, like, you know, they face so much violence in their life, and then they're able to come home to this place. Yeah, I was fascinated by the way that that this book just dropped in these details almost nonchalantly about like the mythos. You know, it's not just Auntie Encarna, La Tía Encarna, with the airplane oil breasts, but also the headless man who is her lover, and who doesn't have a head, but is able to communicate and feel with his entire body. Like, I really like that.
He comes from Africa, a distant land that's described a place of war, constant war, and a place with a bunch of sand. But that's not that one character is not the only mythical or magical character.
Yeah, there's a mute bird.
Her name is Maria Sodrimuda, which just means she is both deaf and mute.
Yeah, and it's like she kind of transforms throughout the book. Like, at first, you it's not like you see her fly at the beginning of the book, but then she like gains feathers throughout, and then by the end, like she basically like has her own cage.
And it's not like she's like a human-sized bird. No, she becomes like a little bird, like a bird-sized bird. And there is also a couple of other characters that are equally magical. There is Natalie, who is a minor character. But we end up learning that she is a werewolf.
If you're listening to this, you may think like, oh, is this just like some book about like a bunch of mythical creatures who are hanging out? It doesn't feel like that at all.
When you hang out with a couple of transvestis, tell me the difference.
It feels like these are just kind of like extensions of like real people. Like when I was reading this, it was very easy to believe that like all this actually happened. That like this is the real story.
Yeah. And there's way more characters. One thing that happens here, as Marcy mentioned, it's like everything is brought up so casually.
Yeah.
Everything from good to bad to just fucked up or weird to things that are just sweet and like poetic, and especially in Spanish. Everything's just brought up so casually. I think the way that this is written, it's kind of written like a conversation, like the type of conversation you have with someone that you've known but maybe haven't seen in a while. So when they tell you about their life and what's been happening and you reminisce about the past, there's kind of no need to vibe each other out. There's also no need to like convince you of whether something is possible or not. You just kind of know, hey, yeah, this girl becomes a bird.
Yeah, definitely that casualness can be seen where sometimes like she'll just be describing this person for like pages and pages and just using like she, and then like after 5 pages she's like, oh yeah, by the way, this person's name is this, and it's like, okay, cool.
Yeah, kind of like how you might have a conversation that just kind of you're with someone and it just meanders and meanders, and then they realize, oh, right, maybe I should tell you this important detail.
Yeah.
And one of those important details that is being mentioned from the very top is that pretty much every character in this book is a sex worker or relates to sex work in some way. But much like transvesti, Camila's not using the term sex work. She might, in fact, maybe hate that term, being like a global north term. She uses the word prostitute.
Yeah.
And in Spanish is prostituta, which is effectively the same. So one of the reasons why we talk about invisibility is because prostitutes are also part of this invisible group of people made by society for, as it's brought up many, many times throughout many different people, they need to be invisible. They need to be set aside. So everyone from the rich to the famous to the well-to-do to the person that just has some extra cash in their pocket is able to use these women, these transvestis, and then discard them as many characters, many of the clients, as Camila uses them. And And that's what this book is about. The invisibility of that interconnection of transvesti, prostituta, pobre, someone who lives in poverty, and everything that revolves around that.
Yeah, she talks about in the book how when she would dress femininely as a child, her father would say, "If you keep dressing like that, you're going to be a prostitute." And then eventually she's just like, "Well, it's my only option, so I'm just going to start doing it." And she even talked about like how, at first she would just do it once, and like, someone would just like roll down their car window and kind of initiate it, and then it was like the literal like economic need that made her do it.
Yeah. She, the character Camila, at 18 is much like Mary Todd Lincoln doing cabaret, like doing strip teases and doing just nude shows around the pueblo that she grew up in. But when she goes to Córdoba to study at university, somebody just because they're a piece of shit who thinks all transvestis are prostitutes rolls down his window and says, "How much?" And Camila just shoots out a number, and that's the first time there is an exchange because of sexual pleasure.
Yeah. And like as it goes on, like she talks a lot about like the conditions that she experiences as she says as a prostitute. And it definitely made me think a lot about like the discussions of sex work I had in the social fam working group that I was a part of. We talked a lot about how about why decriminalizing sex work is something that socialists should fight for. And it made me think about like the book we read, which is Revolting Prostitutes, The Fight for Sex Workers' Rights, written by Molly Smith and Juno Mack, two former sex workers. And I'm going to read one of the quotes. "Outsiders often think that selling sex must be a pretty horrible job, and many sex workers would agree. However, these sex workers may locate the problem not in sex, but in work." People who like haven't really thought about this will often extrapolate that because sex workers experience violence, that that must mean sex work is bad, that must mean we have to get rid of it. But in reality, it's the working conditions that are bad. And I think that was something that like really came through in the book.
Yeah, the conditions are horrible. Constantly throughout the book, Camila, La Tía Encarna, and the rest of the gals, they kind of like go to a park where there's no lights. There's kind of like a lot of wilderness, and this is where the child is also found, and that's where they do their work. And part of this work is dealing with whoever rolls up and who they accept to kind of like service. And Camila talks about like how every single person has their own criteria. and one that always pops up is how good looking someone is. Mm-hmm. That is like one of the criteria that so many of these people, these prostitutes want. But that's not what they always get. They just get people that are, well, dirty, like actually like not physically clean, or people that have communicable diseases. In Spanish, AIDS is called SIDA. So often there's just brought up many times that somebody has SIDA, and they talk about how they have to do things that they don't want. Multiple of the clients ask for things that are barbaric or atrocious and are outside of what anybody would really want to do, but because they don't have any sort of, well, they don't have a union, they don't have a representation, and the closest thing they have to like standards, standard enforcement is each other and La Tía Encarna, that so many gross, ugly, perverted motherfuckers come in and, well, cause some real treacherous working environment for these women.
Yeah, I think one thing I really liked about this book was how it kind of showed that side by side there could be just like horrible stuff and at the same time like immense joy, where the travestis have a ton of joy just like being with each other, and the way that Camila like describes a lot of the people, and I listened to some of this with the audio book, and I really liked listening to that and just hearing like the narrator read the dialogue, and it felt like you really got to like know the characters. And a lot of the characters you only experience for a few pages. Like, you know, Camila will meet one of them and be talking about how amazing this person is, and
or they how they share just the worst possible experience.
yeah, like you know, hearing about like a fight that they got into where like you know, one of them had like blood on their teeth, like one of them like sliced another travesti's cheek. It feels like death was such a big part of her life during this time, and like it was so prevalent. Like, you know, she'll meet someone who will be a huge part of her life, and then 7 pages later that person will die of AIDS.
Which is wild.
Yeah.
But in the same turn, there can be a moment where a character, one of the only prostitutes who has, let's just say, a uterus and a vagina, gets impregnated or is pregnant, and is still working at the park, and eventually gets to the point where these babies need to be delivered, and in a very, what I would say is a very sweet moment, at the house of La Tía Encarna, all the transvestis get like so joyful, so enamored with what is happening, that some of them are like, oh, this is the first time I'm seeing like a vagina.
Yeah.
And then the birth happens, and even still, like, where maybe another writer might talk about how gross it is or how difficult it is, like, the transvestis are elated. They're even like, oh, and the beautiful placenta that came out. And even that, like, that little vignette folds into one thing that happens throughout this book, where it's like some people find true love, where this woman, with the help of a transvesti, delivered these 2 babies because she had twins. And that transvesti goes on to be kind of the nurse for her while she is recuperating, and they fall in love.
Yeah, that was like a really interesting stretch. Yeah, and I do really like the way the book is kind of formatted in this vignette fashion, where you can almost like dip in and out of it, and like at first, I like when I first started reading the book, I didn't even like, you don't learn right away that the main character's name is Camilla. Like, it's almost like thrown at you like after you've like heard a few of these vignettes, and it almost felt like a plot twist to me. Like, oh, whoa, it's that biographical. And I really liked that story, partially because I was like, damn, all these travestis are like sucking dick all day. Like, can't some of us trans queens be like lesbians? That's like a very oversimplification, but some of
The
us like
global
pussy.
north is jumping.
I know. But yeah, I'm glad that they enjoyed seeing the pussy.
Yeah, and I thought there's like so much sweetness in this. Like constantly pops in. And then the exact opposite also comes in
Yeah.
with the same level. I don't really want to go into any details there, but like there are multiple moments where I'm just like, what the fuck is happening?
Yeah.
There are flashbacks, or there's some retellings of Camila's youth, and so much of it is painful. Like one of them is when she was becoming more independent and presenting more as transvesti. She would go to the local kind of like hangout, a bar or arcade. The word that in Spanish that she uses is boliche, and a boliche is a bowling alley, or at least in Mexican Spanish. And in that, she says that like the people that know her from school, when they see her in her the transvesti side of her, the true self of her, they just kind of ignore her. They just kind of like immediately don't. They just set her aside. They make her invisible. And so many other things pop in and pop out with just that level of casualness where the good and the bad come in. And actually, I want to talk about some of the larger stuff here. In that, one of them is the violence here. The violence is constant in this book because the violence is constant in sex work and prostitution. And La Tía Encarna provides some advice to Camila and to the other young transvestis, where she's like, you can get hit in the face, you can get hit in your legs, in your body, but never let yourself be hit in the kidneys.
Oh, kidneys.
Because she got hit so many times throughout her life in the kidneys that she urinates blood. And that level of that level of specificity in the violence just hurts as you read this.
Yeah. So last episode we talked about the violence in Charlie XCX's 2013 album True Romance, and I remember that being something that like made you not want to ever listen to that album again, essentially. Well, I think in this book, I know you like this book a lot. So one question I want to ask you is like, what do you think it is about the violence in this book that like feels like it's kind of enriching your experience versus the Charlie? And I'll say at first, I think part of it, even though the violence in the Charlie album doesn't like have a negative effect in the same way as it does on you, I think that like the violence in this book, first of all, like it's grounded in like real world.
Well, that's kind of the thing. Is it like for true romance, so much of it is like the internal reality of two people, or like some lovers, and in Las Malas, like it is the real world. Like there is the same type of horror that las transvestis de Argentina were going through are some of the same horrors that happen in like the UK or in the United States or in Japan. Like every single society that has not integrated people of a different gender, like a third gender, for example, or people who live as transvesti or as trans, they suffer deep and real violence. And although I am not excited to read it, when I see it, it's real. I know it. I know it's real. It's not the deep internal emotions of a relationship, because those deep internal emotions do pop in throughout this book.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't make me uncomfortable as much as they make me, they unsettle me. So much of this book is seeing how everyone hurts everyone and how everyone reconciles or feels the emotional or physical hits of somebody else, or how they deliver physical and emotional hits to other people. Like the Tia Encarna, who is the kind of the mother of everybody. Like she, even herself, who in one hand comes to the rescue of multiple transvestis, she also yells at them a lot. She also emotionally abuses.
Yeah, she's definitely a double-edged sword where I like her character, but she can definitely be toxic sometimes in the way that she treats people. And
one of them being the headless soldier, the headless man.
Yeah, because basically, like, she kind of shunned him, and that's the reason why he's dead, is because he didn't want to keep living without her. And, it really didn't seem like it was his fault, but, like, she just had this very emotional reaction. And then he just, like, sent a letter being like, well, I don't want you to blame yourself, but I don't exist anymore.
He says that he lived enough.
Yeah.
That, like, if the last thing he did was love her, and the love that he had for her was beautiful. It was another thing that, like, just pops in just very casually to be described as beautiful. How he would wake up early in the morning to go make her breakfast. They don't live together, but he would travel to her place on make her breakfast, also go in on a Friday and stay there till Sunday afternoon and head over to his apartment. And he would also, like, love the other girls there, like they were true and real people that need love. Like, he was good to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was reading that, I was just like, oh, this is just romance. This is true romance.
Finally, a non-toxic male. All it takes to have a non-toxic male is for the man not to have a head.
And, like, that's effectively what Camila, the writer, is saying.
Yeah.
That like the thoughts of men lead them to do shitty ass things.
Mm-hmm.
And there are other characters in this book that show that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we just got, I mean, I guess it's kind of like the opposite of Futurama, which AP and I were talking about earlier for a different reason. In Futurama, they have, like, the heads just, like, in water, so that, like, Bill Nye can be in a Futurama episode, even though that's, like, thousands of years in the future. But I guess it's like, maybe both of us eventually, like, we will be headless people, and we will be the kindest people in the world.
I feel like I'm already there.
Oh, really?
I think I don't need to get rid of the moneymaker.
Yeah. Well, we'll see.
Okay. I feel like that's a little ominous. And so, like, yeah. Although I'm not excited to read the many violent things that happen in this book. It feels real.
Mm-hmm.
It feels more real than the, like, weird emotions of a young adult singing whatever.
Oh, poor Charlie. We're it's not her fault that she's the last episode that we did. Yeah, I'm imagining now it's like we do the Jeff Rosenstock episode before this, and we're like, you know what? This feels like they've had more realistic poor experiences than Jeff Rosenstock. Can you
pick one lane? Are all men problematic, or are not all men problematic? All right, you're bringing up.
I'm using Jeff Rosenstock because I know that I love him, and I know that I can use him in this example as a joke.
Yeah. So I want to talk about some other stuff that happens in Las Malas. And I think this is very clear with who Camila is that she's upfront about it. It's like the reason why so much of this bullshit happens is because of capitalism. Mm-hmm. She rails against the middle class in this book a lot, how they're ignorant or how they're just in their little precious towers, ignoring everything that is happening. Because Camila, both in the real world or what looks like to be in the real world, and also in this book, the character grew up poor. And I like how she just brings up the depravity of so many of the rich people in this. One of them being these two siblings, these two, I don't even know what word to use. I guess guys, these rich boys, they kind of just play as transvesti and also kind of like do sex work as a like it's not even a way of rebelling. And I like what she says is that it's almost as if they're looking to be something.
Yeah, they're almost like like you said, like cosplaying. I feel like I bring this up in every single episode, but it definitely reminded me of the Faggots and Their Friends Between Revolutions, because that book talks about like queer men who like have sex with men, but then like dress up in the business casual clothes like throughout the day, and like when they're asked at work if it like what they're doing, they're like, oh, just going on a date with my girlfriend, and they're like, oh, can I meet her? And then they like avoid the question so that like the people they work with never have to find out that they're queer. And like,
I avoid that question, but for different reasons.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll get into the Patreon, but I think AP's pretty safe.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. But like, she constantly she talks about la clase mediana or la media clase, I should say, the middle class. And then part of it, she's like, I want to kind of go after she suffers some like difficulty. Like she's like, I kind of just want to go and burn the houses of all these motherfuckers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think oftentimes, like in socialist organizing, we talk about like how there's a lot of people who are socialists who may not even use that word. Like growing up poor makes you a socialist, even if you don't immediately identify that as yourself. So it's not just people who show up to Zoom meetings who are socialists.
I didn't look into like her politics, Camila's politics, because it didn't matter to me. Mm-hmm. Because everything that is being written, even in some of the other works that I have looked into, she is constantly questioning the validity and the function of some of these big tent posts. One of them, in this case, being motherhood. Like this book also deals a lot with motherhood and what that is like and what that should be, and including daughterhood as well. In the book, Camila's mom is kind of a shitty mom too, which I like. Like it's good. I like seeing both sides, the good mom and the bad mom, and I like seeing the good dad and the bad dad, and also kind of like blah blah blah, and she always connects it back. It's like, the dad of Camila is kind of cheating on Camila's mom, but also he's doing it because he's got no fucking money. He's got like no prospects. He at one point does the thing that like a lot of horrible men do, which is seclude them way out in the middle of nowhere, so he can more easily jump from his the person that he is cheating with and the wife.
Yeah.
And it's like that comes purely, that comes out of the difficulties born from capitalism, including the patriarchal system.
Yeah, like a lot of books about a dad who cheats on your mom would just be like, yeah, my dad's shitty, he did this, but like the fact that she actually like puts the class analysis in there like makes it a lot more interesting.
Mm-hmm. And she's upfront about also just she got into prostitution because of money, and a lot of people also got into it because of money, because they're not allowed to. A lot of transvestites are just not allowed to be part of society, and I think that actually goes into what happened with Maria, why she became a bird. I think part of that is not just to show the magical world, but I think it's another way of hitting on the fact that transvestites are set aside to the invisible place because of the way they look. And I think Camila makes it evident by going the extra step and showing that, okay, what would happen if somebody started growing feathers? They would just be ostracized. They wouldn't be allowed to go anywhere and eventually be condemned to being inside.
Yeah, and I think it's like an extension of her being deaf and mute, where it's showing that like when there's multiple ways that someone is marginalized by society, that makes it even harder for someone to exist because the society like just tries to keep that person away. And it makes me think about how the United States treats homeless people, the way the United States treats disabled people, where like oftentimes like, you know, like creating those benches where you can't lie down on them. And I mean, like in Chicago, the way that homeless people are being treated is extremely shitty.
How they were literally rounded up before the DNC.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even so-called progressive Mayor Brandon Johnson is like not doing what needs to be done, and like really violence is happening against people, and that's why we're talking so much about invisibility, is that there's so many ways that like both in Argentina and the United States that people are invisibilized, and I think that like Camila just does a really good job of like hitting at all these ways that it happens. And like the fact like this book, it doesn't really have like a straightforward plot, but I think like it's still really like lets you into this world and lets you into like what all the characters are facing. And I think that's like one of the really impressive things about it.
And it happens constantly. Like one of them is also how like the invisibility that is forced on the transvesti is also a place for people to commit violence. But that's generally like the book. The book is casual about so many big topics: good, bad, moral, ethical, and in the need for survival. Oh, actually, that reminds me. Like she constantly talks about how she needs to lie, how she needs to be a good liar. And as someone who loves a liar, like I love seeing pro lying fiction, just because it's like it's not common. I don't think it's common, at least.
Yeah, you know, AP, for someone who loves lying so much, you should watch Survivor, because that's like what the show is based around, about lying about who's in your alliance, lying about what advantages you have. And yeah, like look, you know, after a new season of Survivor premieres, I'm gonna just start talking about it. Like, okay, so this season they have so many podcasters in it. So obviously we have John Levitt, who, spoiler alert, he's the first boot. Yeah.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, he is. Pod Save America, flop.
Yeah.
Crooked Media,
Pod couldn't save Survivor.
more like Cooked Media. Yeah. So I'm currently reading for Asia. She's also a podcaster. She has podcasts about Survivor and Big Brother on RHAP.
Can you stop glazing up the competition here?
Yeah, I'm sure it's like people are like, huh, am I going to listen to Rob Has a Podcast or am I going to watch or am I going to listen to Dove Weather? I can't decide. No, I think it's like
Dove Weather.
Yeah.
I can decide. I guess okay.
Yeah, I mean I bring this up because like it's I think like the book itself is very humorous at times, and it's about like a very serious topic, but it infuses so much humor, and that makes me want to like just throw in my random bits of humor into Dove Weather, even when we're talking about like serious things like sex work and white supremacy and the way that people are invisibilized. So yeah, that's just a little Marcy rant for you.
Read Las Malas. Like, if you have not read Las Malas, read Las Malas. It's a good book. Mm-hmm. It's a good book. I really like it. It might be one of my favorite books. I'm gonna actually get a couple of people to read it, and I can assure you, everything what we've covered here is nothing compared to the actual book itself and how much it covers. I read it in Spanish if you know Spanish. It's just such a joyful, easy, conversational read. But yeah, read Las Malas.
I think this makes me want to read more books that are translated from other languages, because I think that the translator, who I'm going to read the translator's name. The translator was Kit Maud. I think that the translator did a great job here, and I think that we live in a culture where it's very easy to just consume a lot of American media. But I think this makes me want to consume more media that doesn't come from the United States, and not just anime, which of course we all know that we love anime, but even more things.
JJK coming to an end. I'm watching you. I'm reading you, and I'm happy, but I'm a little sad.
There's always characters I in JJK, so I assume that could be anyone. But yeah, I think also reading queer and trans stories from other cultures, it makes me want to do more of that too, because I think I came out as trans in 2021, and I immediately started reading Detransition Baby, Politics, the Form of a Mortal Girl, and a bunch of trans and queer books that came out in the United States. But there's definitely a history here, and it didn't all originate in the United States. And I think that this reading this book has definitely inspired me to expand my horizons more.
Yeah, I want to read some of her plays.
Yeah, let's do it.
I think before we end, I think we should do something a little this book is so much about being against cowardliness,
mm-hmm.
and I wanna put that on us here.
Ooh, okay, let's do it.
Let's talk about white supremacy.
Let's do it.
What I want you to start.
Okay, so America was founded on white supremacy, and it was founded on violence against Black people, and that still pervades our country today, and it extends to violence against Black and brown people. The most easiest way we see that is in the genocide in Palestine, which the U.S. is directly funding. And it's not just Biden. Kamala Harris is also pro-funding genocide. Even if she says that she's pro-ceasefire, she is funding Israel directly. So white supremacism is alive and well, unfortunately, in America.
And that's at the top level, right?
Yeah.
But white supremacy goes from the top level to the bottommost level, and two sub-basements down.
Yeah, it exists all throughout American culture. It exists in this podcast itself, and that is something that we are trying to work on.
So I don't I want you to speak to me.
Yeah.
I don't want you to like speak to some imaginary person. Like talk to me.
Yeah. Okay. So AP.
I talk to me, not you. What do you mean AP something? No, talk to me. Talk to me. And I actually think this is one example of what happens in white supremacy. That it's easier to set aside things, to as we said, invisibilize things. I want you to talk to me about the white supremacy in this podcast.
Okay. So, well, it shows up in the way that we pick topics, and it shows up, I think, in the way that we talk about certain things, and yeah, the way that we talk about violence.
Like we didn't start with any major mandate about what art and media we're supposed to cover. But looking at everything that we've covered, there is an overwhelming majority of
white subjects and white authors.
and like we didn't, like you and I, we didn't ask to do that. Like did I ever say, yo, let's make sure that we cover fucking, all of this like white related subjects, right?
Yeah,
Like,
we did not set out to do that at all. And yeah,
but why do you think that popped up?
I think part of it is that, I know for me, I think a lot of the media I consume has white people in it, and I think I don't do a good enough job of like branching out more often.
But the interesting thing is that like I'm not white, right?
Yeah.
But like it still popped up.
Yeah.
50% of this pod is brown.
It definitely wasn't just the things that I picked. Like definitely some of the things that you definitely, I think, made more of an effort. Like for instance, picking Kronos, and some of the other things. But yeah, it definitely, like, it wasn't like every other podcast when I was like looking into it, was like made by white people, starring white people. I do think that it's something where like white supremacy affects all of us, and like gets inside us even if we're not white, like partially because it's the media that's like pushed to us, like for instance in TV and movies like Hulu and Netflix and all these other streaming services. A lot of the shows and movies that they create are like created by white people, and then they might make TV shows and movies with like people of color at the forefront and behind the cameras, but then they cancel those if they don't get a lot of viewers after one season. And so I definitely think that part of it is like the white supremacy inherent in like how things are pushed to us. But
in the 21st century, making a TV show or making a movie is incredibly expensive. And because of that, and because it's been it's specifically in that realm, it's been financialized to hell. There is no incentive to give someone who isn't Steven Spielberg, or is within the realm of this idea of the mainstream that might make money. It's easier to just give money to those people, to the fucking Martin Scorsese's of the world, or even to like fuck it, like even I feel like The Bear. I feel like The Bear is like a great example of that, where it's like you give this show a chance, this original IP a chance, which is still an expensive show to make, but then it's easier to just not provide the funds to another show. Like I think about Los Spookies, for example. Only got 2 seasons.
Yeah.
2 great seasons. But it fucking sucks.
Yeah. And it does make me think about Richard Gadd, who I know that you were a fan of Baby Reindeer. I haven't seen it yet, but he talked about on the Emmys about how he was someone who, his show wasn't an IP, and it was this word of mouth success that got all these awards. The thing is, though, he is still a white guy, and that shows who the people are that get these opportunities to make something that's not based on IP. So that white supremacy is so inherent in the industry and affects what gets made.
And because it requires for someone to make money off of it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's easier to go with and more comfortable for the people that have power, the rich elite to just go with the people that they know.
Yeah, and basically everyone.
But can I just say?
Yeah, go ahead.
It feels like that's not enough though to describe why we didn't even catch this, because it's one thing to say this industry is built around making profit, but it's also we from the very onset said we'll cover multiple types of media and art, and I don't have an answer to why it went this way. I just know, looking at it, I'm glad we caught it.
I'm glad we caught it too, and I'm glad that we're basically white people are not going to be the subject of many more episodes in the future.
Okay, I mean I'm not trying to that's I appreciate that that, but to me I don't see it that way either. It's not that I'm against white people. And it's not that I am I am someone who's light skinned. I benefit from white privilege, even though that I'm not white. I think, I bring this up and I want to talk about this on mic because to me, it is an oddity that two smart, capable, and educated people like us, educated in our leftism, that it just kind of fell into it. And I just find that very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think acknowledging that we don't have all the answers is a good thing, because I think under white supremacy, oftentimes you feel like you have to find the answer immediately, because otherwise you'll be branded as racist. But the thing about it is that you can't just avoid being racist. You have to acknowledge the racism that already exists and then work on it instead.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's not just enough to be to not be a racist. You have to be anti-racist.
Absolutely.
Right? Everybody learned that phrase in 2020, right? And I like how Camila is so upfront about being fuck this global north shit. What are you talking about? Soy Argentina. I'm happy that I got to talk about Camila. Her voice, her thoughts feel very important, very of the moment. Someone who's not afraid to just say the shit that is happening right now. And to me, I love that. If I'm ever gonna talk about art, or media, it's because some of that realness of the world is being reflected there. And I think that is what I describe as sincerity, as part of sincerity. Mm-hmm. And I think, in a way, white supremacy rails against the idea of sincerity.
Yeah, and sincerity is something that we have really strived for since the beginning of this podcast. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to continuing to be sincere in the future.
And you can be sincere with us on Instagram.
And on YouTube.
We are Dove Weather everywhere, including in your mom's contact. You can give us a 5-star review, because we would really appreciate that, because we are thankful that you listen to this podcast, and there are more to come. I can tell you right here, right now, that we have in the plans a
live show.
and that live show is gonna be good, y'all. It's gonna definitely not be fucked audio. And if you happen to be in the Chicago area, follow us on Instagram. You'll see some information there. You hear us, you've seen us, but soon enough you might be even to smell us.
Yeah, I gotta make sure that I wear my best deodorant that day, as if I have more than one type of deodorant I wear.
Thank you so much for listening, y'all.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.